Welcome back, Queens. Let's face it, sometimes silence is the loudest answer you can give. When you stop texting him, you're not just leaving a message unread. You're leaving him alone with himself, forcing him to confront a reality he's been avoiding. And in that quiet, he begins to think. But what is he thinking? That's the question, isn't it? And the answer is simpler and darker than you might imagine. When you go silent, he feels the void. It's like standing in a room where the hum of a machine suddenly stops. At first, it's unsettling. Then, it's maddening. That silence is your power. It's the thing he didn't see coming. You see, every time you sent a text, every time you waited for his reply, you fed his ego. You became predictable, accessible. But when the texts stop, it's like flipping the chessboard mid-game. He thought he was in control, but now he's the one left scrambling, trying to figure out the rules. This isn't about petty games. It's about reclaiming your space, your time, and your energy. Think of Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, who ruled not just Rome, but also his emotions. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When you stop texting him, you're embodying that wisdom. You're choosing not to react. You're refusing to let someone else dictate your state of mind. That's not just power, that's liberation. But let's dig deeper into what happens in his mind. Dark psychology tells us that people thrive on control. When someone feels like they can predict your moves, they believe they own a part of you. Every text you sent gave him a map to your emotions, a blueprint for how much you cared, how much you were willing to give, and how much he could take. By stopping, you burn that map. He's left wandering in the dark, questioning everything he thought he knew about you. Imagine this. You're a lighthouse. For weeks, maybe months, you've been guiding his ship safely to shore. He's depended on your light, even if he didn't always acknowledge it. But now, the light's gone. The waves are rough, the night is cold, and suddenly, he realizes just how much he took that light for granted. That's what your silence feels like to him. It's not just the absence of a text. It's the absence of security, attention and validation. And don't be fooled. He'll likely try to rationalize your silence. At first, he'll think you're just playing hard to get. Then, he'll start to wonder if you've moved on, if someone else has your attention. This is where the cracks begin to show. Dark psychology teaches us that the human mind struggles with uncertainty. He'll replay conversations, analyze old texts, and try to decipher the moment you shifted. It's a cruel irony. He didn't value your words when he had them, but now that they're gone, they're all he can think about. Here's where the Stoic touch comes in. When you stop texting, you're practicing apatheia, the Stoic ideal of emotional resilience. You're not ignoring him out of spite, you're removing yourself from the chaos. You're reminding yourself that your peace isn't a bargaining chip. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Replace man with woman, and let that quote guide you. Your silence is not about punishing him, it's about preserving yourself. Let's be real, part of him will panic. Not outwardly, of course, he'll try to play it cool. But inside, he'll feel the shift. Men like him often underestimate the power of a woman's withdrawal. They think their games are invincible, their control unshakable. But when the puppet cuts the strings, the puppet master is left holding empty air. That's what your silence does. It flips the dynamic. Suddenly, he's not the one with power. You are. Think of a fire. Your texts were the fuel he used to keep his fire burning, to keep his confidence alive. Every emoji, every "How are you?" was a log he threw onto his flame. But now you've stopped. The fire dwindles, flickers, and slowly dies. He might try to reignite it, send a casual "hey" or a nostalgic "remember when?" But here's the secret. The fire doesn't burn without your permission. And when you realize that, you become untouchable. Silence isn't just a tactic, it's a mirror. It forces him to see himself clearly, without the distraction of your validation. And what he sees might not be pretty. He'll see the cracks in his own confidence, the insecurities he's been masking with your attention. He'll see that he's not the invincible player he thought he was. And you? You'll see that his opinion of you was never the foundation of your worth. Remember this: you don't owe him a text. You don't owe him closure, explanations, or reassurances. Stoicism teaches us to let go of things we cannot control. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, said Marcus Aurelius. When you stop texting, you're not stooping to his level. You're rising above it. You're choosing dignity over desperation, self-respect over self-sacrifice. In the end, your silence is your greatest weapon. It's the thing he never prepared for, because he never thought you'd realize your own power. But now, you have. And as he sits there staring at his phone, waiting for a message that will never come, you'll know the truth. The game ended the moment you decided you weren't a player. You're not just walking away from his control, you're walking into your own freedom. Now, here is your task. Affirm this with me, right here, right now. I am not a pawn in anyone's game. I am the master of my own story, and my silence speaks louder than words. And now, don't keep this power to yourself. I want all my queens to declare it out loud in the comments. Simply type, "I am the master of my silence." And don't just whisper it to yourself in the mirror. Let it resound in every choice you make, every time you resist the urge to text, and every moment you reclaim your energy. Let your silence echo with the strength of someone who knows her worth, someone who doesn't seek validation, but commands respect by simply existing in her full, unapologetic power. Let this be your mantra, your reminder, and your declaration. Number 1, he feels the silence like a thunderclap. The moment you stop texting him, it's like pulling the rug out from under his carefully orchestrated game. He didn't think it would happen. He thought you'd keep feeding his ego, keep playing along, keep letting his breadcrumbs feel like a feast. But then the silence comes, sudden and sharp, like a lightning strike splitting a darkened sky. It's not just unexpected, it's blinding. It illuminates everything he's been ignoring, everything he's taken for granted. And for the first time, he feels it, the absence of you. At first, he tells himself it's no big deal. Maybe you're busy, maybe you'll text tomorrow, but as the hours stretch on and the messages don't come, that crack in his confidence begins to widen. What he thought was his control over you wasn't control at all. It was convenience. And your silence? It's the thing he never prepared for. Picture this. He's standing in a quiet room, the air thick with the absence of sound. He keeps waiting for the noise to return, but it doesn't. That's what your silence feels like, a void that grows larger and heavier with every passing moment. It's not just the lack of your words, it's the loss of your presence, your energy, your light. And suddenly, he's not sure if he's the one in control anymore. You might be thinking, does he even care? What if he doesn't notice? Let me tell you this, silence is always noticed. It's human nature to crave what's no longer freely given. When you stop texting, you shift the balance of power, and he feels it, even if he doesn't admit it. It's not about whether he says it out loud. It's about the questions running through his mind. Why did she stop? Did I push her too far? Is someone else taking my place? Dark psychology teaches us that uncertainty is one of the most effective tools to disrupt someone's confidence. And your silence is the ultimate uncertainty. It's the answer he can't find, the equation he can't solve. The attention he thought he controlled is gone, and now he's left grappling with the truth. You're not as predictable as he believed. Imagine him as a captain steering a ship, navigating waters he thought he knew. Your silence is the storm that clouds his vision, the sudden shift in the tides that throws him off course. He thought he was the one charting the journey, but now he realizes he's lost without your guidance. The irony? He never valued the lighthouse until it stopped shining. Here's the part he doesn't understand yet. Your silence isn't about him. It's about you. It's about reclaiming the energy you've poured into someone who didn't appreciate it. It's about stepping back and giving yourself the space to breathe, to heal, to remember who you are outside of his games. Silence is a source of great strength, Lao Tzu once said. And that's what you're showing him now, strength. Not the kind that shouts or demands attention, but the kind that speaks through absence. Your silence says more than words ever could. It tells him you're done waiting for him to step up, done justifying his actions, done explaining why you deserve better. But let's be honest, this isn't just about what he feels. It's about what you feel too. Walking away from someone you care about isn't easy, even when you know it's the right thing to do. There will be moments of doubt, moments when you wonder if he's worth one last message. Resist the urge. Every time you reach for your phone, remind yourself, silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. He thought he knew you. He thought he could predict your every move, control the rhythm of your connection. But your silence is the plot twist he never saw coming. It's the moment the puppet cuts the strings, the moment the chessboard flips, the moment the game ends. Not because he won, but because you decided it wasn't worth playing anymore. Say this with me: I am not his game to win. I am my own victory. Let that truth sink in. Let it remind you of your power. He feels the silence like a lightning strike because it exposes his own emptiness. And as he scrambles to understand what happened, to regain the control he thought he had, you'll realize something beautiful. The storm he's in isn't yours to weather. It never was. By the time he finally understands the depth of your silence, by the time he realizes what he's lost, you'll be too far ahead to care. Because the power of silence isn't in what it takes away, it's in what it gives back. And now, you're the one holding the reins. Number 2, he watches the game slip through his fingers. There's nothing more unnerving for a man who thrives on control than the realization that his game is slipping away. When you stop texting him, it's not just silence he feels. It's the unraveling of the dynamic he thought he controlled. He had the pieces arranged just the way he wanted. You chasing, you waiting, you playing by his unspoken rules. But now, those pieces are falling, slipping through his fingers like grains of sand, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. He might not show it at first. Men like him rarely do. He'll put on the mask of indifference, convince himself that you'll come back, that this is just a phase. But as the hours turn into days, and his phone remains stubbornly silent, the cracks begin to show. He starts to see the truth. The power he thought he had was never his. It was yours, given willingly, and now you've taken it back. Picture him as a gambler at a poker table, smug and self-assured, holding what he thinks is a winning hand. He's spent the game bluffing, keeping you in suspense, making you second-guess your moves. But then you do the one thing he didn't expect. You fold. You walk away from the table, leaving him sitting there with his empty bravado and no one left to play against. That's what your silence feels like. A game-ending move he didn't see coming. And now he's left wondering, what changed? What did I do wrong? He replays every interaction, every message, searching for the moment you stopped playing along. Dark psychology tells us that the human mind hates unanswered questions, and his mind is no exception. And the uncertainty gnaws at him, eroding his confidence. He thought he was in control, but now he sees the truth. Control is an illusion, and he's the one left fumbling in the dark. You might be asking yourself, does it really matter to him? Does he even notice? Let me tell you this. When someone builds their sense of power on your reactions, your absence is more noticeable than you think. It's like a juggler suddenly losing one of their props. The performance falters, and he's left scrambling to maintain the show. Your silence disrupts the rhythm he depended on, leaving him off balance and unprepared. Imagine a tightrope walker confidently making his way across the wire, only to realize halfway through that the safety net has been pulled away. That's what it feels like when you stop texting him. You were his safety net, the constant that allowed him to take risks, to play his games without fear of consequences. And now that you're gone, every step feels uncertain, every move a potential fall. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one, said Marcus Aurelius. Your silence echoes this wisdom. You're not arguing, not explaining, not pleading for him to understand your worth. You're simply stepping away from the game, showing him through your actions what you will and won't accept. And in doing so, you're proving that his rules don't apply to you anymore. As he watches the game slip through his fingers, panic sets in. He starts to question everything he thought he knew about you. Was she serious about me? Did I misread her? Is someone else in the picture? These questions become a storm in his mind, one he can't escape. He thought he was the one playing you, but now he realizes you've always had the power to walk away, and that's a power he can't match. Let's be clear. This isn't about revenge or manipulation. It's about reclaiming your energy, your peace, and your dignity. For too long, you played by his rules, hoping he'd eventually see your value. But now, you're writing your own rules. And rule number 1 is simple. You don't play games where the odds are stacked against you. Think of an hourglass. For weeks, maybe months, you watched the sand slip away, wondering when he'd finally make a move, wondering if the effort you poured into him would ever be returned. But when you stopped texting, you turned that hourglass upside down. Now he's the one watching the time slip away, wondering how he let something so valuable escape his grasp. Say this with me. I am not a game piece. I am the player, and I decide when the game ends. Let that truth resonate within you. He watches the game slip through his fingers because he underestimated you. He thought you'd always be there, always waiting, always playing along. But now, as he sits there, staring at the empty board, he sees the truth. The game wasn't his to win. It was yours to leave. And by the time he fully understands what he's lost, you'll have already moved on, building a life so full, so radiant, that his games will feel like nothing more than a distant memory. Number 3, he feels the weight of your worth. When you stop texting him, the first thing he feels is confusion. But as the silence stretches on, that confusion shifts into something heavier, something undeniable. He begins to feel the weight of your worth pressing down on him like a realization that's been a long time coming. You see, your absence is more than just quiet. It's a spotlight. and in its beam, he can no longer avoid the truth he's been ignoring. You were never just a passing thought. You were the anchor in his chaos, the constant he never appreciated, the value he never fully saw, until now. At first, he might try to shrug it off, tell himself that you'll come back, that this silence is just temporary. But the longer it lingers, the clearer it becomes. He didn't just lose a text thread, he lost someone who saw him, cared for him, and gave him parts of herself she didn't give to anyone else. And now, he feels it. The void where your light used to be, the gravity of your worth pulling at him even as you step away. People only realize the value of the sun when it's no longer shining, the saying goes. And you were his sun, warming a world he didn't even know had gone cold. But now, he's left in the shadow of his own indifference, grappling with the understanding that your worth was never something he earned. It was something you gifted him, and now that gift is gone. Imagine this. He's walking into a room he used to take for granted. The walls were adorned with your care, the air filled with your laughter, the floor steady beneath his feet because you held it all together. Now that room feels barren. The walls are blank, the air is heavy, and the floor feels unsteady beneath his pride. That's what the weight of your worth feels like. It's not just something he notices, it's something he can't escape. You might wonder, does he really feel this? Can someone so blind to my value suddenly see it now that I'm gone? The answer is simple. Yes, because people don't miss what's replaceable. They miss what's rare. And you? You're irreplaceable. His realization may not come with grand gestures or immediate apologies, but it comes all the same. It creeps in during the quiet moments, in the spaces where your texts used to be, in the times when he needs support and finds himself alone. Your worth isn't something he can ignore. It's a weight that grows heavier with every day of your silence. Dark psychology teaches us that people often mistake kindness for weakness until that kindness is no longer offered. He thought he could coast on your patience, lean on your understanding, and count on your attention without ever truly earning it. But now, without your presence, he's left carrying the burden of his own complacency. It's like a mirror being held up to his face, forcing him to see not only what he's lost, but also what he failed to appreciate. Think of a crown, a symbol of value, strength, and dignity. You wore it effortlessly, even when he didn't acknowledge it. But now that you've taken it back, he feels the weight of its absence. He realizes that your worth isn't something that can be diminished by neglect. It's something that becomes even more undeniable when it's withheld. And now, as he sits in the void of your silence, he's left wondering, how could I have overlooked something so precious? This isn't about vengeance, it's about balance. For so long you tipped the scales in his favor, giving more than you received, offering more than he deserved. But now, the scales have evened out, and the imbalance is something he can't ignore. The weight of your worth is no longer carried by you. It's his to bear, and it's heavier than he ever imagined. What we tolerate is what we teach others to expect, they say. By stepping back, by withholding your texts and your attention, you're teaching him a lesson he'll never forget. Your worth isn't something to be taken lightly. It's not a convenience, it's a privilege. And that privilege is no longer his to claim. Picture him trying to move on, trying to fill the void you left behind. He might distract himself, throw himself into work, or even reach out to others. But nothing feels the same, because the weight of your worth isn't something that can be replaced. It's unique, singular, and unforgettable. And now, it's a weight he'll carry with him, long after the silence has settled. Say this with me. My worth is not a burden. It is my crown. Let that truth fuel you. Let it remind you that stepping back isn't just an act of strength. It's an act of self-respect. He feels the weight of your worth now because, for the first time, he's being forced to carry what you've always brought to the table. And as that realization settles over him, you'll find yourself lighter, freer, and more certain of the truth you've known all along. Your worth isn't just something he feels. It's something he'll never forget. Number 4. He questions his reflection in the mirror and sees the cracks in his reflection. When you stop texting him, something strange happens. At first, he might shrug it off, telling himself it's no big deal. But as the silence stretches, it becomes impossible to ignore. Suddenly, he's left alone, not just with the absence of your words, but with the one person he's been avoiding all along, himself. Without your texts to anchor him, he's forced to confront his own reflection. And that mirror? It's unforgiving. The image he sees isn't the confident, in-control man he tells the world he is. Instead, it's riddled with cracks, flaws he's tried to mask with charm, control, and distractions. Your silence strips away the noise, leaving him to face the truth of who he really is. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one, said Marcus Aurelius. But here's the thing, he hasn't been. He knows it. And now, for the first time, there's no escaping it. He's spent so much time focusing on you, what you're doing, how you're feeling, how much of yourself you're willing to give, that he's never stopped to consider his own actions. But now, in the quiet, you've left behind every unanswered question, every broken promise, every game he played stares back at him from that mirror. Imagine standing in a dimly lit room, staring at your own reflection as a single spotlight grows brighter and brighter. There's nowhere to hide. Every shadow, every blemish, every crack becomes painfully visible. That's what he feels now. Your silence is the light exposing all the things he's tried to avoid about himself. The insecurities, the doubts, the fear of not being enough. He starts to ask himself questions he's never had to face before. Was I wrong? Did I push her too far? Why did I act like that? The answers don't come easily because he's not used to looking inward. Dark psychology tells us that people often externalize their problems, blaming others or seeking validation to avoid confronting their own faults. But without your texts to deflect his focus, he's left with only himself. And it's a conversation he doesn't know how to have. You might wonder, does he really see his flaws? Does he even care? The truth is, whether he admits it or not, silence forces self-reflection. It's like standing at the edge of a still lake, where every ripple is a reminder of what's been tossed into the water. Your absence creates a stillness in his life, and in that stillness, he can't help but notice the mess he's made. Here's the irony. For so long, he thought he held the power. He thought he could string you along, feed you half-truths, and keep you waiting. But now, he's realizing that the person he's been trying to manipulate isn't the weak one. You are the strong one. The cracks in the mirror aren't in you, they're in him. And for the first time, he has to face them without your reassurance to soften the blow. Picture this, a man standing in front of a cracked mirror, trying to piece together the broken shards. Each piece shows a fragment of himself, a side he doesn't want to see. His reflection isn't whole anymore, and no matter how hard he tries, he can't make it perfect again. That's what happens when your silence takes away the illusion he's been living in. Stoicism teaches us that self-awareness is the first step to growth. It is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about these things. Your silence doesn't harm him. It forces him to judge himself. It pushes him to look at the choices he's made and the man he's become. And that reflection, it's not as flattering as he once believed. He starts to question everything. Why did I treat her like that? Why did I think she'd always stay? Am I even capable of giving her what she deserves? These are questions he should have asked long ago, but it's only now, when you've stepped back, that they come to the surface. Here's the hard truth. Not everyone can handle what they see in the mirror. Some people will shatter it completely, refusing to face their flaws. Others will try to blame the cracks on someone else. But a few, just a few, will use that reflection as a wake-up call, a chance to grow into something better. Which one is he? That's not your concern anymore. Your silence isn't about his transformation. It's about yours. Say this with me. I am not responsible for his reflection. I am only responsible for mine. Let that truth sink in. Let it remind you that stepping back isn't just an act of strength. It's an act of self-preservation. His reflection in the mirror isn't your burden to carry, and his cracks aren't yours to fix. He might never tell you how much your silence shook him. He might never admit how deeply he was forced to look at himself. But deep down, he knows. And as he stands there, staring at his fractured reflection, you'll be miles ahead, looking at your own, and seeing nothing but strength, growth, and clarity. Number 5. He feels the chill of being replaced. The moment your texts stop, a cold realization starts creeping in. At first it's subtle, like a draft slipping through a crack in the door, but soon it becomes undeniable, a full-body chill that he can't shake. He feels it. The possibility, no, the reality, that he's no longer the center of your world, and worse, that someone else might be. This isn't just about losing your attention. It's about the way his ego takes a hit, hard and fast, like a stone dropped into icy water. He always thought you'd be there, orbiting around him, your world tethered to his whims. But now he's realizing you're not waiting in the wings for his next performance. Instead, he imagines you smiling at someone else's jokes, glowing under someone else's gaze, building a connection where his games used to live. That thought, it's not just unsettling, it's terrifying. Dark psychology teaches us that people who rely on control are often haunted by the fear of being replaced. They thrive on the idea that they're indispensable, that no one else could ever occupy the space they hold in your life. But when you stop texting, you take a wrecking ball to that illusion. You force him to confront the harsh truth. He's not the only one who could catch your eye, nor is he the best you could ever have. Picture him in a room, the temperature dropping with each passing second. Every glance at his phone that doesn't reveal your name is another icy gust, cutting through the warm cocoon of his confidence. And then the doubts settle in, like frost on a window pane. What if she's moved on? What if someone else sees her worth better than I did? He thought he could keep you on pause, but now he's realizing that life doesn't wait, and neither do you. You might wonder, but does he really care? Will he even notice? Let me tell you, nothing makes someone notice your worth faster than the fear of someone else recognizing it first. The idea of being replaced doesn't just sting, it freezes him in place, paralyzing his ego with the thought that he miscalculated. He thought he had time, thought he had control. But your silence is a reminder that time moves on, and so do you. Imagine him as a king who suddenly finds his throne empty. He assumed it would always be his, that no one else could ever sit there. But now he sees someone else standing in the wings, ready to take his place. That's the chill he feels, the loss of certainty, the creeping dread that he's no longer unique in your eyes. And here's the part he can't admit, even to himself. He knows he created this. He knows that every time he took you for granted, every time he chose indifference over effort, every time he played it cool instead of stepping up, he was pushing you closer to the edge. And now, as he feels the cold weight of being replaced, he's realizing just how warm your presence was. But this isn't just about him. This is about you too. You've spent too much time waiting for him to notice your worth, hoping he'd wake up to what's right in front of him. But now you're realizing something he never thought you would. His inability to value you doesn't diminish your value. It highlights his blindness, not your inadequacy. The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion, Albert Camus once said. And that's what you're doing now. By stepping back, by refusing to play his game, you're reminding him and yourself that you are not defined by his attention. Here's the irony. The more he tries to hold on to the idea that he's irreplaceable, the more he feels the cracks forming. He starts to imagine someone else seeing what he couldn't, appreciating what he took for granted. And that's the chill that cuts the deepest. The thought that someone else will give you everything he couldn't, everything you deserved. But let's be clear, this isn't about revenge. You're not moving on to prove a point or make him jealous. You're moving on because it's what you deserve. Someone who values you without needing to lose you first. He thought he was the only one who could occupy that space in your life. But now he's seeing the truth. He's replaceable. Say this with me. He was never my only option, and I was never his to take for granted. Let it sink in. Let it fuel you. The chill he feels isn't just about being replaced. It's about realizing he underestimated you. He thought he had forever, but now he sees the truth. The only irreplaceable thing in your life was your decision to choose yourself. And that's a choice he'll never have power over again. Number 6. He learns that breadcrumbs don't satisfy. There's a moment in every game where the rules stop working, when the strategies that once kept you hooked begin to fail. That's the moment he learns that the breadcrumbs he's been feeding you aren't enough. When you stop chasing the scraps, he tosses your way. He feels it like a hunger he can't ignore. His ego depended on the illusion that the crumbs were a feast. But now, faced with your silence, he's left to confront a bitter truth. The breadcrumbs aren't satisfying anymore, and they never were. For so long, he played this game with precision. A late-night text here, a vague compliment there, just enough to keep you tethered, but never enough to make you feel full. And you clung to the crumbs, not because you didn't know your worth, but because you believed in the potential of more. You thought, maybe this time he'll give me the whole loaf. But now, as the crumbs lie untouched, he starts to realize he miscalculated. The game he thought he controlled is slipping through his fingers. Picture this: a man standing at a table, holding out a handful of crumbs. He's done it 100 times before, certain you'll take them. But now, the table is empty. You're no longer sitting there waiting for his scraps. He doesn't understand at first. He thinks you'll come back, that hunger will drive you to settle again. But as time drags on, the truth hits him like a punch in the gut. You're no longer hungry for what he's offering. Dark psychology tells us that people who breadcrumb others do so not out of love, but control. It's not about giving you what you need. It's about giving you just enough to keep you dependent. Every crumb he threw your way was a way to keep you orbiting him, feeding his ego, while he gave the bare minimum. But when you step away, when you refuse to accept anything less than what you deserve, he's the one left starving for your attention, your energy, your presence. You might wonder, does he even notice? Does he care? Let me tell you this. Men who breadcrumb always notice when their crumbs stop working. The power of breadcrumbs lies in the fact that they're taken. The moment you stop, the entire dynamic shifts. He starts to feel the absence of your acceptance, the emptiness where his control used to be. It's not just that you're not there. It's that he realizes you've outgrown what he thought would always keep you tethered. Here's the truth. A man who offers crumbs does so because he's convinced you won't walk away. He's banking on your patience, your hope, your willingness to settle for less. But when you stop, when you step back and let the silence speak for itself, he begins to see what he's lost. It's not just your presence, it's your belief in him, your faith that he could be more. And that realization cuts deeper than any argument ever could. Imagine him now, holding those same breadcrumbs in his hand, staring at them as if they'll somehow turn into something more. But they don't. And as he stands there, he starts to see what you've known all along. Crumbs aren't love, they're leftovers. And you're done settling for the scraps when you deserve the feast. This isn't about revenge. It's not about punishing him or making him regret his choices. It's about reclaiming your worth. Stoic philosophy reminds us that our value isn't determined by what others give us, but by what we demand for ourselves. If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them, Marcus Aurelius said. Refusing his breadcrumbs isn't about him. It's about freeing yourself from the judgment that said crumbs were ever enough. Let's address the doubts you might be feeling. What if he starts giving me more? What if he changes? Here's the truth. A man who truly values you doesn't wait for you to walk away to offer more. He doesn't ration his affection, his time, or his effort. If he cared deeply, the feast would have been there all along. The crumbs are not a reflection of what he's capable of. They're a reflection of what he thought you'd settle for. So, what happens when the crumbs stop working? He starts to feel the emptiness he left in your life echoing back to him. He starts to see that the person he thought he could keep on standby is no longer waiting. He starts to realize that he's the one who's been starving all along, starving for something real, something whole, something more than the hollow control he once had. And you've moved on. You've found the strength to leave the table, to demand the feast you've always deserved. Say this with me. I will not settle for crumbs when I deserve the feast. Let it resonate. Let it fuel you. The man who thought he could keep you with scraps has learned the hard way that you're no longer hungry for what he's offering. You're done chasing crumbs, and now he's the one left with nothing but regret. The table has turned, and you're not coming back. Number 7. He feels the flame flicker and die. When you stop texting him, it's not just the end of a conversation. It's the slow, steady extinguishing of a flame he never thought would go out. For so long, he fed off the warmth of your attention, your affection, your energy. It was a fire you kept alive with every message, every question, every effort to keep the connection burning. And he thought it would last forever, fueled by your endless patience and unwavering care. But then, something changed. The texts stopped coming. The warmth he had taken for granted began to fade. He didn't notice it at first. Flames don't die in an instant. It's subtle at the start, a flicker here, a dimming there. He assumed you'd rekindle it soon enough, After all, hadn't you always done so before? But as the silence stretched on, as his phone stayed quiet, the truth began to dawn on him. This time, you weren't coming back. Picture this. He's standing by a campfire in the dead of night. The fire had been his comfort, his light, his anchor against the dark. He had never worried about tending to it, assuming it would burn endlessly on its own. But now, as the embers fade and the cold creeps in, he feels the loss in his bones. That's what your silence does to him. It doesn't just leave him alone. It leaves him exposed to the emptiness he's been avoiding. He might not admit it, even to himself, but he feels the shift. He feels the absence of the texts he once brushed off, the absence of the energy you poured into keeping the connection alive. And with every passing day, the flame grows weaker, the light dimmer, until all that's left is smoke and the faintest glow of what used to be. You might be asking yourself, but does he care? Did he ever care? Let me tell you this. People only realize the value of warmth when they feel the cold. He may have acted indifferent before, but your silence forces him to confront a truth he's been avoiding. That you were the one who kept the fire alive, and now that it's fading, he has no idea how to bring it back. Dark psychology teaches us that loss is one of the most powerful motivators. When something or someone he relied on is gone, it creates a void that cannot be ignored. He starts to feel the sting of what he's lost, the burn of regret for the moments he didn't appreciate, the texts he left unanswered, the effort he dismissed. It's not just about missing you, it's about realizing he never truly valued you until the flame began to die. Think of him as a moth drawn to a flame. He didn't notice its beauty or its brilliance. He just relied on it to be there. But now, as the light fades, he's left fluttering in the dark, confused and unmoored. He thought he could control the fire, keep it burning on his terms. But your silence proves otherwise. He might try to reignite it, of course. A casual, "Hey, how are you?" A nostalgic, "Remember when we..." He'll toss those sparks your way, hoping they'll catch, hoping you'll pick up where he left off. But here's the thing about fires. Once they go out, they don't come back without real effort. And effort, that's something he's never truly given. This is where your strength comes in. Stoicism teaches us that we cannot control others, only ourselves. It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters, said Epictetus. By walking away, by letting the flame die, you're choosing to react with wisdom instead of desperation. You're choosing to protect your peace instead of clinging to a fire that only burned you. He feels the flame flicker and die, but what he doesn't yet understand is that you're not extinguishing it out of spite. You're doing it because you deserve more than a flame that only burns when it's convenient for him. You deserve a fire that's mutual, enduring and strong, one that doesn't need constant tending to keep from going out. Say this with me. I am not his fire to stoke. I am the blaze he could never contain. Let that truth settle in. Let it remind you of your worth. He thought the fire would burn forever, but he forgot one crucial thing. It was never the fire that needed him. It was him who needed the fire. And by the time he finally realizes what he's lost, by the time he understands that the warmth he took for granted is gone, it'll be too late. Because you're not just letting the flame die, you're walking away from the ashes, ready to ignite a fire that truly deserves your light.